Astroworld Tragedy. On the evening of November 5th, 2021, roughly 50,000 people packed into NRG Park in Houston, Texas for the opening night of Astroworld Festival. Within a matter of minutes, that crowd would become something else entirely. A wall of bodies pressed so tightly together that people could no longer move, could no longer breathe, and in 10 cases, could not survive. This is the story of how a music festival became one of the deadliest crowd disasters in modern American history, and the years-long reckoning over who was responsible. The festival. Astroworld was the creation of rapper Travis Scott, a Houston native who named the event after a beloved local amusement park that had closed years earlier. By 2021, Astroworld had grown into one of the most anticipated festivals on the music calendar, drawing tens of thousands of fans, many of them young, to NRG Park for 2 days of performances. The festival was produced by Live Nation, the largest live entertainment company in the world, in partnership with the promotion company Scoremore and venue operator ASM Global. Scott himself was known for concerts with an especially intense atmosphere. His performances
had a history of encouraging crowd energy that bordered on chaotic, something that had drawn scrutiny at prior events over the years. On the first night of the 2021 festival, the crowd gathered at the main stage well before Scott's headlining set. As showtime approached, the density of the crowd became extreme. Video and witness accounts from that evening describe people packed so closely together that some could not lift their arms. Even before Scott appeared, attendees reported difficulty breathing and people losing consciousness simply from the pressure of the crowd around them. According to the police report later released on the incident, a contract worker grew alarmed by what he was witnessing even before the headline set began. Minutes before Scott took the stage, that worker sent a text message to an event organizer warning that someone was going to end up dead. The crush. When Travis Scott took the stage, the crowd surged forward.
In the crush that followed, people near the front were pinned against barricades and against each other, unable to move in any direction. Some described being lifted off their feet entirely by the pressure of the crowd, their bodies carried forward without any control over their own movement. As the crush intensified, people began to lose consciousness. Bystanders attempted to pull others up and out of the crowd, passing injured concertgoers overhead towards security barriers in an effort to get them medical attention. Compression asphyxia, the mechanism by which the body is squeezed too tightly to allow the lungs to expand, became the cause of death for every person who ultimately died that night. Medical experts would later compare the physical trauma to the kind of injury typically seen in a serious car crash. The performance continued for a significant period after the crush began. Concertgoers and later investigators raised serious questions about how much organizers and performers on stage knew about what was happening in the crowd, and how quickly or slowly that information moved toward a decision to stop the show. Emergency responders, some already stationed inside the festival grounds, worked to reach victims through a densely packed crowd that made access extremely difficult. A field hospital had been set up at the venue, but the sheer number of people requiring urgent care in a short span of time overwhelmed the medical resources on site. By the end of the night,
8 people were confirmed dead. 2 more, including a 9-year-old boy named Ezra Blount, who had been sitting on his father's shoulders when the crush occurred and became separated after his father lost consciousness, later died from their injuries in the hospital, bringing the final death toll to 10. The victims ranged in age from 9 to 27. Thousands more were injured, with legal filings later citing figures near 5,000 people affected in some form. The investigation. In the days following the tragedy, Houston police and fire officials opened a formal investigation into what had gone wrong. The scope of the inquiry was significant, examining crowd planning documents, security staffing levels, communication logs between organizers during the event, and the specific sequence of decisions made as the crush was unfolding in real time. The investigation ultimately produced a report exceeding 1,200 pages.
Released publicly nearly 2 years after the event, it detailed a chaotic operational picture on the ground that night,
including confusion among security and medical personnel about the scale of what was happening, and communication breakdowns between different teams responsible for crowd safety. Central questions emerged around whether the festival had been adequately staffed and planned for a crowd of that size, and intensity, whether warning signs earlier in the evening and even in the hours before the show began should have prompted organizers to halt or delay the performance, and how the decision-making chain functioned once it became clear people were in serious danger. Separately from the criminal investigation, the disaster triggered an enormous wave of civil litigation. More than 500 lawsuits were eventually filed, naming Travis Scott, Live Nation, ASM Global, and other individuals and companies connected to the event's planning and execution. The suits alleged, broadly, that organizers knew or should have known the risks posed by the crowd conditions and failed to implement adequate safety measures to prevent them. The grand jury. For nearly a year and a half, the criminal side of the investigation moved forward under the Harris County District Attorney's Office. Investigators reviewed footage, testimony, and internal planning documents in an effort to determine whether any individual or organization bore criminal responsibility for the deaths. In June 2023, after roughly 19 months of investigation, a Harris County grand jury declined to indict Travis Scott or 5 other individuals connected to the festival's production, including a Live Nation festival manager. The district attorney's office stated that the grand jury process represented an exhaustive effort to determine what, if any, criminal liability existed. Attorneys for Scott and the other individuals cleared by the grand jury maintained that the decision confirmed their clients bore no responsibility for what had happened, framing the tragedy as the result of circumstances beyond anyone's deliberate control. For many of the victims' families, the grand jury's decision did not close the matter. It shifted the primary battleground for accountability entirely into civil court, where the standard of proof required is lower than in a criminal case, and where the question being asked was not whether anyone had committed a crime, but whether organizers had been negligent in their duty to keep attendees safe. The settlements. The civil cases moved slowly through Texas courts over the following years, consolidated into a coordinated legal process designed to handle the volume of claims arising from a single event. Throughout 2023 and into 2024, the 10 wrongful death cases, representing the families of those who lost their lives, worked their way toward resolution one at a time. By May 2024, 9 of the 10 wrongful death lawsuits had been settled out of court under confidential terms protected by a gag order. The final remaining case belonged to the family of Ezra Blunt, the 9-year-old whose death had become one of the most widely recognized losses from that night. His family had initially pushed for the case to proceed to trial, with jury selection scheduled for September 2024. That trial never took place. In May 2024, attorneys confirmed that the Blunt family's case had also been settled, bringing an end to the wrongful death litigation stemming from the tragedy nearly 3 years after it occurred. Thousands of injury claims filed by surviving attendees, separate from the 10 wrongful death cases, continued moving through the court system afterward. The Astroworld tragedy remains one of the deadliest crowd crush disasters in recent American history, a case where the question of blame was never resolved through a single verdict, but instead settled quietly, family by family, outside of open court. No individual was ever criminally charged in connection with the 10 deaths. What the investigation did produce was an extensive, documented account of how quickly a large crowd can become dangerous, how difficult it can be for organizers and performers to recognize the severity of a crisis unfolding in real time, and how thin the line can be between a celebrated cultural event and a catastrophe. For the families of the 10 people who died that night, the legal process ultimately ended not with a trial, but with settlements reached far from the public eye, closing the case without ever fully answering, in a courtroom, exactly who was responsible.